Shabbat Shalom. The book of Genesis brings us a clear and powerful message that an entire world can be created or destroyed with the power of speech. We as Jews know this all too well, not only from our sacred texts, but from our centuries of pain and struggle. Throughout the generations, we've experienced suffering while lamenting the silence of onlookers. When we hear the all too familiar cries of persecution, how can we possibly remain silent?
It is written all over our sacred texts. Do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. Be kind to the stranger, for you were once strangers in Egypt. Justice, justice shall you pursue.
It is memorialized in the history books by those we admire. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. We will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Few are guilty, but all are responsible. The past week has been spiritually, emotionally, and morally challenging.
Over 100,000 people in this country have died from COVID-19. The loss of life has been devastating, and the loss of way of life has inhibited our ability to cope.
The collective hearts of our country turned last week to George Floyd. Because of technology, we have the ability to watch the entire 8 minutes and 46 seconds of a police officer's knee pressed against the neck of a man suspected of using a counterfeit $20 bill.
We see a man take another man's life while remaining callously indifferent to his cries of suffering.
Now is the time for leaders to lead, for the oppressed to exercise their right to protest, and for those on the sidelines to realize that in the fight for justice and equality, there is no such thing as a bystander. First and foremost, we must state with clarity and without hesitation, Black Lives Matter. This is not a commentary on a movement or a political position. It's a statement of fact.
This doesn't mean that all lives do not matter. This doesn't mean that we value law enforcement any less. It is an acknowledgement of the pain felt by our brothers and sisters, pain which is caused by a broken system in which we are complicit. Imagine going to the hospital with a broken bone in your arm. How would you feel if the doctor refused to treat your arm, saying, "All bones matter"? Of course all bones matter, but the one that is broken needs the attention right now. Our nation has a history of racial injustice that is prevalent in our society today. We all need to become familiar with the inherent privileges and challenges that come with the color of our skin.
The protests that have occurred in recent days have highlighted some of the challenges we face, as well as some of the evidence that our country is ready to listen. First, the challenges. It is hard not to see the irony and the criticism of these protests. On June 1st, President Trump spoke in the Rose Garden and announced that he is an ally of all peaceful protesters. Over the past several years, we have seen athletes take a knee in protest of racial injustice. We have seen them wear "I Can't Breathe" shirts and speak out from their own pulpits. They have been told to stick to sports, to shut up and dribble. They've been called SOBs for kneeling down during the national anthem.
The protesters were silenced when they knelt peacefully. It is no wonder they are taking to the streets today. Compare the treatment of these protesters to those who gathered to demand beaches to open for spring break. Compare them to the treatment of the masked gunmen who stormed federal buildings to protest the lockdown during the pandemic. Look at the photos side by side. See the privilege.
Last week, one group of people took to the streets demanding a haircut. This week, another just wants the right to breathe. Which group has tear gas raining down upon them? Which group is bruised by rubber bullets? On the streets, we have seen windows smashed and stores looted. We have seen building and cars on fire. This is regrettable and unfortunate, but that can't distract us from what is going on at the heart of these protests.
Throughout these protests, we have witnessed both productive and destructive actions from law enforcement. On Tuesday evening here in New Orleans, police officers and protesters met on I-10. A New Orleans police commander, Chief Deputy Superintendent John Thomas, addressed the crowd. "We feel ashamed for what this officer did to tarnish the badge," he said. "We support you." Soon after, the officers in riot gear all took a knee. But the very next evening, NOPD officers used tear gas to disperse a peaceful crowd of protesters on the expressway. What we need is a fundamental change in how our law enforcement and criminal justice system function, not a series of empty gestures.
We at Congregation Gates of Prayer, as well as the broader Jewish community, know our law enforcement well. They have stood by us during difficult moments and protected us as we pray and gather. The officers who join us every Shabbat are like family to us, and we pray diligently for their safety. We are speaking today because we believe that as rabbis of our congregation, we have a responsibility to lead. We are representative of a group of people who are no strangers to oppression. Our voices can be powerful when heard and painful when absent. But we believe that our role is to elevate the voices of the oppressed.
It is not our place to speak on behalf of the Black community. It is our role to listen to and elevate Black voices within our congregation and in the broader community. Shema Yisrael. Listen, Israel. Listening is a central tenet of our faith. When we listen, when we really listen, without thinking about how we're going to respond or what we're going to say next, that is when we can be true allies.
Listening also enables us to look inward, to consider the ways we are implicit in the systematic racism of our society, whether consciously or subconsciously. Tzedek, our social justice and social action group, will be holding an anti-racist book club on a monthly basis to better understand this reality. We invite everyone to join.
Judaism teaches us that when our world feels like it is burning with the anguish of the oppressed, it is not prayer, ritual, or study that we must pursue. We are commanded to look inward, listen outward, and be agents for peace, justice, and understanding. The battle for racial equality in our community is still being fought, and as long as the battle continues, so must our involvement. As a congregation, we will be exploring further steps to participate in interfaith and interracial dialogue and alliances for justice. We will need to build bridges where they do not exist and strengthen ties with our neighbors. And we must look to our faith, for the one thing that unites all people of faith is a desire for peace. As Micah proclaimed in the prophecy, it is incumbent upon us to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly in the light of God. Shabbat Shalom.